Live from the Talking Joe Studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe comics podcast. Today, we will be looking at G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero 311, released on 20th of November, 2024, featuring, on the front cover, the Thunder Machine.
Now you're looking at the Dreadnoughts Thunder Machine. Dreadnoughts Thunder Machine, meanest machine you've ever seen, and it's out to get G.I. Joe!
There we go, bringing the Thunder and the Thunder Machine. That's our parody of the Imagine Dragons. So we will be talking about A Real American Hero today, issue 311. Some people call it 311, but I will not be doing it alone. As always, I will be joined by my co-host. It's Real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark. Hello, listeners.
How are you doing, Tim?
I am well. I'm a little better because an issue of G.I. Joe came out this week, and that's always the best week of the month.
Excellent stuff. Let's do a bit.
Going back to high school, when the Marvel G.I. Joe was a third week title, and the third week of the month, a new issue of G.I. Joe came out, and that was the best week. You know, I think Punisher was second week, and War Journal was fourth week, Transformers was fourth week, and third week was the best week.
And the Thunder Machine, always a favorite vehicle of mine. It's something about it. It's just about perfect. Definitely in my top 5 for sure across all of G.I. Joe. So before we get into the contents of this issue, which I will say again and reuse my pun, spoilers ahead because spoilers. Before we get into that, landing on the shore of the UK is the Battle Action Force. Nice hardbacks, all 3 volumes, all in one go. Landed on my doorstep this week. For those of you that have ordered that in the US, I believe that will be following soon because it has farther to go across those there waters of the oceans. And anything else that we want to say, Tim? Events and things that before we get into it, shall we touch on your signing? Why not? We've been talking about it.
Energon Universe G.I. Joe artist Tom Riley signed at my comic book store, Hub Comics, just a week before we recorded this episode that you're hearing or watching right now. He was at the store for 4 hours. He showed up a little early. I got him a nice coffee next door. We went next door and I showed him the cool cafe. Some people were there an hour early, came to my store an hour early, and they had comics ready to sign. And of course, people might have driven from farther away, having already gotten G.I. Joe #1 from their local store, or maybe even from the mail, through the mail. It was busy the first 2 hours and then a little less busy the third hour, which was nice because everyone who wanted a sketch got a sketch, and everyone who wanted signatures got signatures. So we didn't have to turn anyone away. There wasn't, a long line out the door, though I was also hoping for a long line out the door. But me having stood in a long line at a convention for a famous comics writer artist to answer questions and sign people's comics and draw sketches, I do appreciate a fast-moving line or not much of a line. And then in the final hour, it was a little slower, which was also kind of nice because Riley had just been working for 3 hours and had just driven an hour before that, and had also done a convention the weekend before, and had also been inking issue 3 all week. And he said to me, I don't mind if it slows down during the signing because, I don't mind relaxing on a Saturday when I'm working all day. And then afterwards, he and I got dinner, and then he drove away, and it was great. We get to talk about art and school and comics artists, and I knew not to ask him any questions about the future of comics at Skybound because he can't answer.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. And you've been, hobnobbing with all of the greats because you also had the Living Legends panel at AR, Assembly Required, that you moderated with Larry Hama and Ron Wagner. So I think the episode for that will probably be the one after this one that drops. It's sort of very interesting panel, listening as just a pure observer as the other day for that, and dropping the nice little nugget that Larry Hama is definitely a little bit of ahead on things, because he is currently writing 315, I believe. So the creative team should have a little bit of leeway to be not bound by the scripts slipping, which is great news.
That said, that is true. That is true. That said, something was confirmed for me in a different Skybound comic, which we already knew, but I was really struck. So yes, Hama is a little bit ahead. The month that 311 comes out, he has turned in the plot for 315. And he said to me that writing the plot takes time and can be difficult. And then the art gets done, and then he gets to see the art, and then he writes the dialogue. And that's some weeks later. And he said writing the dialogue takes a day and it's easy. So we have known that there are skip months in Skybound's A Real American Hero publishing schedule. And I kept hoping that this was something that they were going to not do anymore, but here in this month's Walking Dead Deluxe 100, not to be confused with this month's Walking Dead Deluxe 101, because this ships every 2 weeks. On the letters page to The Walking Dead, they sometimes print new letters in this reprint book. Someone asks about Larry Hama writing G.I. Joe reboots. And the answer is Larry is busy writing 10 issues of ARAH a year. So I'll pivot to say that something, other things you can buy from Skybound. And the letters page in Real American Hero has referred to skip months, we're skipping October, we'll see you in November. It feels a little different when it's phrased, Larry Hama is busy writing 10 issues a year, because that is decidedly not 12. And it made me realize that this might be policy. And I was really grumpy about that for the last 2 weeks. And I thought, well, that's not fair. IDW didn't skip months, and Real American Hero was always monthly. And, Larry's not going to be around forever. And I want as many issues from him as reasonably possible. And Skybound shouldn't, add in any artificial gaps or buffers. But then I realized, I think a lot of Skybound books take skip months, like Firepower, which Robert Kirkman wrote and Chris Samnee drew. And that ran, I forget, 30 or 40 issues. And that had a couple skips between, it's not really arcs because it's all kind of one story, and I think a couple of those skips were more than 1 or 2 months. And I wasn't reading Invincible when it was being published. I am reading this reprint of The Walking Dead, and it reprints the original letters. And oh boy, do a lot of original letters and original letter replies refer to the sort of slipping schedule. And, in the first couple years, only getting 9 or 10 or 11 issues out a year. And then they're sort of on schedule. And then Kirkman's working on the TV show. And I know that later that book started shipping more often. But I realized, and then I think isn't there a reference to this schedule in the letters page of 311? I think that the people at Skybound realized that the old model of a creative team cranking throughout the year, even if you have different art teams or fill-in artists, I think they have found that can be unrealistic, and it is better to just plan for fewer issues a year to maintain a level of quality, if not consistency.
And speaking of which, in the latest solicitations for Skybound for February, we had ARAH 314 solicited, which has Andrew Cranky as a fill-in artist. So, and the I think on the cover to the issue is Tunnel Rat, who hasn't been part of this current story. So it may well be that is an actual fill-in, that is a break in the middle of this current story that Chris Mooneyham will be drawing.
I believe it is. When I spoke with Hama, separate from the panel at Assembly Required, and I said, so you're on 315, something like, do you consider that ahead? There are all these skip months. And he said, well, yeah, I'm on 315, and we did that fill-in issue. Which is to say, to use an old Marvel term, I wrote that inventory story. I think what he was, this is me assuming, I think Hama wrote a self-contained one-issue story that Skybound could have someone else draw, and then they could slot in to give, let's say, Chris Mooneyham a little more time on a regular issue. And I think at the end of 313, the sort of battle in Springfield and Serpentor Khan stuff is going to be continuing. And then I think the first page of 314 is not going to refer to that. And then I think the last page of 314 is not going to refer to that. It's going to be a self-contained adventure. Maybe there'll be a little bit of bridging material, over the radio. Someone will say, we got to get to Springfield and help out with the Serpentor Khan stuff. And so I hope what this means, if the fill-in is being scheduled soon or quickly, I hope this means that sort of the next skip month is further off or something like that. But here it is in the letters page to 311, in the opening two paragraphs. Editor Alex Antone says, and welcome back to you, our dear readers. We hope you don't mind an odd skip month now and then, but that's what it takes to bring you the highest quality Real American Hero possible. We hope it was worth the wait. And I do mind the odd skip month. I really do. It hurts to have this wonderful comic back in my hands and so good, and then to every 5 or 6 months not have it. Although, if there's going to be a skip month, but I get all the Energon Universe G.I. Joe stuff, that's a nice balm. But I think what I was sort of hinting at before is, when we think of Marvel and DC books publishing 12 issues a month in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, there is a lot of inconsistency. Sometimes a couple issues into someone's run, suddenly the last couple pages don't look as good. They look a little rushed. There isn't as much detail. The color isn't as refined. Another artist is drawing it. And what we don't have is that we don't have that in any Skybound book. Every Skybound comic is always, super consistent. And, Destro number 3 feels like an unusual exception, but even that was quite a high level of quality. And it's a guy who'd already been doing other Energon Universe stuff, and the colorist and the letterer are the same. So I have spoken to 2 people who said, oh, I didn't realize that was a different artist on Destro number 3 until I got to the end, which I think also might speak to some people looking at the art less than I do and, thinking more about story. But so G.I. Joe is kind of monthly.
So, creative team. This issue was brought to us by writer Larry Hama, artist Chris Mooneyham, colorist Francesco Segala, with flatter Sabrina Del Grosso. Letterer is Pat Brousseau. And we've got the normal background people. We've got editor Alex Antone, Jillian Crab, Richard Mercado, and Diana Davis, all helping out too. So, what's next? Should we look at those things, what sit in the front of the book? And they've got pretty pictures on them. What are they called?
Covers.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Something new with the main cover to issue 311. Cover artist for the series, Andy Kubert, returns with a thrilling action moment. The color artist is no longer Brad Anderson, who I've talked a lot about, and I think is exclusive to Ghost Machine, which is an imprint at Image. So Brad Anderson is not coloring Andy Kubert's cover this month. The color artist is Tamara Bonvillain, who Dan Mora fans will recognize because she colored Once and Future at Boom, which Dan Mora drew, and she colored the first 2 years of Batman Superman World's Finest, which Dan Mora drew. And I really like her colors, and if you had told me she was going to color some G.I. Joe covers, I would not have believed you. So this is a fun surprise. Okay, so in this scene, Dreadnoks are crowding on and in the Thunder Machine, and Zartan is standing on the front of it, holding the Baroness, who we know from the story has been wounded, but we don't see that literally on this cover. Everyone has weapons ablazing, and just about everyone has open mouth as if they're, yelling or calling. We see a variety of weapons: a cinder block on a stick, a chainsaw, a machine gun, a pistol, another machine gun, the big double Gatling gun that is the signature of the Thunder Machine. On the bottom, we see a little bit of the Springfield, welcome to Springfield, the nice little town sign, which we have now seen twice, Mark, in this new run of covers by Andy Kubert.
Once, twice, 3 times the Springfield sign.
Which refers back to the first time we saw it on the cover of, I always get this wrong, issue 9, issue 10, back in the Marvel run in 82. There is some debris in the background of out houses. We see a chimney and some framing for a house, both on the left and on the right. The Dreadnoks seem to be attacking here, but we don't see any kind of adversary. We don't see any return fire. We don't see any soldiers or silhouettes or vehicles in the background of people who might be chasing them or having just been driven through. So this cover is fun, and it asks a question, and it leaves a lot of sort of clues or information out. This is a good reminder that G.I. Joe is a vehicle-based concept. And, there are a lot of Batman covers where Batman is, swinging or jumping or punching or just standing there. There are very few Batman covers with the Batmobile or the Batwing. And about half of G.I. Joe covers, maybe 35%, have a vehicle. We have seen the Baroness before in this position in the original Cobra Civil War. A Ron Wagner cover, Mark, help me out. Is it 76, where Serpentor, the original Serpentor, is leaning forward on a HISS tank, and Baroness, captured and unconscious, is draped over a HISS tank cockpit in a somewhat similar pose as this. I really like this cover. I do have to say, considering how excited I am to have Tamara Bonvillain coloring Andy Kubert here, I actually wish for a slightly different approach to the colors here. I see a lot of bright lights all in the front from the Gatling guns and everyone's weapons. And I think in the inking, what I see is Andy Kubert suggesting that everyone sort of on their front have some kind of highlight or glow. And then on sort of everyone's sides, a sort of darker color for their skin or their clothing. And look at the cast shadows of the metal grill that's holding up the Gatling gun. Sort of those 3 diagonal lines between the 4 horizontal lines of that sort of purple metal bar, right? That's a cast shadow. And so I find the coloring on this cover a little flat considering the extreme light source, but I do still like it. Cover B is black and white. In some previous cover Bs, either Andy Kubert or someone at Skybound adjusted all of the black levels of his inks so that the cover prints as pure white or pure black. You don't get that sort of like dark gray of actual ink brush strokes and pen lines on paper. And interestingly, this one you do, that sort of final finishing step of prepping artwork or publishing an image in pure black and pure white was missed here, which is kind of fun. I don't consider this a mistake. Sometimes if you don't understand what I'm saying, this cover looks a little bit more like an artist edition image where the artwork was scanned and then not adjusted at all. Though it was not printed in color, right? We don't see any yellowing of the paper or any coffee rings. But I love these black and white covers because we are reminded just what a great inker Andy Kubert is, what a sense of volume, thick and thin lines, placement of blacks and textures we get here, right? Some things look like, dirt, some things look like burnt out husks, some things look like leather, some things look like metal, some things look like, blazing, jacketed death as bullets fire past us. Very exciting cover. Cover C is the 1:10 ratio variant, and it is drawn by Francis Portela, who is, I think, unknown in the world of G.I. Joe. He's been bouncing around here and there. I first encountered him, was it 15 years ago when he drew some Black Panther during the Reginald Hudlin arc, right after T'Challa and Storm got married. They go to the Marvel zombie universe for a couple of issues. He was drawing the series then, and this is a neat Snake Eyes cover. What's the concept word, Mark, that Skybound is using?
Camouflage.
Yeah, so this run of variant covers are considered, quote, camouflage. That is not to say actual patterns from like camo pants, where, Snake Eyes has all these green splotches on him and or is hiding in leaves. This is to say something about the character is blending in with their surroundings in a graphical color and design sense. In this case, Snake Eyes is standing upright, although he's leaning, he's hunching back a little bit. I think a little bit more weight is on his left leg. He's holding a sword, he's holding an Uzi. He's all in black. There are no lines added in to define any of his muscles or where sort of the bottom of his jaw overlaps over his neck. He's just pure black. And then there are details and lines within the sort of straps and belts on his costume. The Arashikage logo is on his right shoulder, and then echoing this sense of red lines on a black form. The background is all black with the 6 red lines, broken and unbroken, of that Arashikage logo, as if almost he's standing in front of an oriental shade, like a curtain, the kind that sort of folds. And so you have this repeated design element of red lines on black for Snake Eyes and red lines on black for the background. This cover, in a really fun and funny way, is inadvertently, I believe, this is not an homage, this is not a swipe, remarkably similar to a G.I. Joe cover we have seen before on this very series. I'm not talking about a different universe, a different continuity. I'm talking about the 2011 IDW cover for issue 169 of this very series, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero. It was the B cover. It is Snake Eyes waist up, holding an Uzi. He's got a sword, although he doesn't have it drawn. And rather than the logo on his shoulder, the logo's on his wrist where his costume is torn. And behind him is all black and the red 6 broken and unbroken lines of the Arashikage logo. The coloring on this, which I think is Andrew Crossley. I don't have it in front of me. But there's much more rendering to it. There are light sources. There are highlights on the sort of metal parts of his costume and his gun. And the moment several months ago that Skybound released this first camouflage variant cover, I thought, wait, are they doing a cover swipe? And then I thought, no, they're not going to do that. This is actually a coincidence, just a very funny one.
Very good. And a final cover, as listed in the front of the book, is the Mike Mayhew variant. But so this is either an accident that they've left his name in from previous credits, or we just simply haven't seen the Mike Mayhew cover yet.
Just to be clear, Mark, sometimes we record episodes about issues before the issues are on sale. In this case, we are recording this episode a few days after this issue is on sale, and we have not seen this Mayhew cover if it exists.
That's correct. Sometimes the artist retailer variants do follow a little later than the standard release date. So that certainly happens with the Clayton Crane variants. But yeah, as yet, no Mike Mayhew variant for this particular cover, although obviously he has certainly done quite a few before. So maybe we will see one emerge in the coming days. Stay tuned to the Talking Joe Facebook group, where of course we will share it when or if it becomes available. Shall we move on to a plot breakdown, Tim?
Yes.
Plot breakdown.
The Battle of Springfield is raging as Serpentor Khan's enhanced mutant cyborg army pursues the Cobra Force, led by a fake Cobra commander in a battlesuit, as they feign a retreat into a trap in the athletic field. Rattlers and Mambas unleash a devastating attack on the mutant forces. At Springfield Hospital, Zartan arrives with a wounded Baroness, supported by the Dreadnoks and the Joe Ninjas. Zartan disguises himself as Cobra Commander to get to the front of the queue. Back at the battle, as Cobra Commander's forces look on course for victory, they are about to finish them off when Night Ravens and Revanche stealth bombers intercept and deliver reinforcements, led by Serpentor Khan, who flies down on a Cobra Claw. Under Serpentor's leadership, the tide of the battle is turned. Victory is looking to be on the cards until his air assets are taken out in a surprise aerial attack from Destro and his Iron Grenadiers in despoilers, with Demons, Dominators and Razorbacks deployed as ground forces. Destro knocks Serpentor to the ground, announcing he has arrived to see Khan's plans of conquest go down in flames. But, comes the reply, very well, but I intend to take you with me. Dun dun dun. An exciting climax for you, Tim?
Yes, this was an exciting comic book that I read, Mark.
Okay.
It was a lovely return after the skip month that I've already complained about, and also really wonderful to have Chris Mooneyham back on art chores. I didn't realize how much I would miss him until he was gone for five issues, 6 issues.
Mm-hmm. 5 issues.
5 issues. I was hard on his work in some earlier episodes of Talking Joe, where I thought a little of his visual storytelling could have been clearer and more dramatic. There are improvements here, I'm happy to say, and also him not drawing the book for a while made me realize just how exciting his character poses are, his facial expressions, the tension in how his characters twist and lunge and point and throw, and his heavy use of black ink, which A, just makes this book look exciting, B, I think reflects some of the darkness and dire stakes of this story. C is a really good anchor or counterweight for Francesco Segala's coloring. And I thought that in that first issue drawn by Paul Pelletier, where I felt that Segala was coloring Pelletier the exact same way that he colored Mooneyham, and actually needed to adjust his approach a little bit. And it took 2 or 3 issues to do that. And then I felt that on those 5 issues, art and color were in sync. And I also had missed the activity of Chris Mooneyham's page layouts, how he actually puts a lot of smaller panels as inset panels over larger panels. For example, page 4 and 5 of this issue, where the top panel on 4, we see the Springfield Community Center is floating on top of the next panel, but it's floating on top of a part of it that it isn't important. It just creates some visual interest and depth. And then the same thing happens again on the next page, where panel 1 is actually technically a full page splash, but panels 2 and 3 and 4 are on top of it. And sort of everything that they're covering up is just sort of silhouetted foliage. I hadn't realized how much I missed Chris Mooneyham's very fine detail when it comes to putting in very, very small, thin lines on, characters' arms and legs, and ceiling supports and bricks in the background. And, I really liked Paul Pelletier's work. There were some things that he said to us he was less comfortable drawing, and that G.I. Joe very much accentuates, like weapons and vehicles and realistic weapons. And Mooneyham is very comfortable doing them. And boy, are there a lot of vehicles in this issue. And, it's never going to happen where they alternate issues, but, it'd be really fun to sort of mush them into one art team. I'm sure neither of them wants to do this, but, it'd be fun to have, and this would never happen, but it'd be fun to have sort of both of them doing page layouts and Pelletier penciling and Mooneyham inking. Again, neither of them wants to do this, and this is sort of obnoxious of me to even suggest, but I really love each of their strengths, and I would love, since their strengths are different from each other, I would love to see all of those strengths sort of evenly spread across not just one issue, but a run of G.I. Joe issues. So
Very good.
That's my take on the issue. Mark, do you have a take?
I was just going to touch on the art a second. Yeah, it is sort of great to see Chris Mooneyham back. He's got a real punch with his art, and it's clearly very well received by the fans as well. You're commenting on the sort of panel layout and the design of a page made me start flicking through the book as well. One of them that my eye was drawn towards was it's about page 6 of the Dreadnoks arriving at the emergency room. And just what's interesting layout for the page. They've got this really long, sort of thin horizontal panel that sort of takes across the whole of the top of the page of the Thunder Machine and the Dreadnoks on their bikes in profile. It's an unusual panel in terms of the size and the layout. You don't see many like that. And then in the rest of the page, you've got this kind of almost half-page splash at the bottom of them arriving at the emergency room. But then it's sort of being taken up on the right-hand side of the page as well as a kind of reverse L-shaped panel where you've got a big wedge at the bottom, and then you've got it stretching up almost to the top of the page, where you see the top of the emergency room and up into the skies where there's a helicopter. It's a really interesting layout. It's not the kind of thing that you would necessarily see very often. So I think you could certainly linger on the each page and look at it as a piece of design, as a piece of art in its own right, sort of slightly divorced from the overall story, and sort of just soak it in. And I think that's a really big strength of Mooneyham, is that sense of design to each page. And then I was going to also mention as well that what's become clearer since we last spoke about Mooneyham's art was about the fact that a lot of his Joe art is being drawn digitally, and that was evident from his art rep Felix Liu, who put a bunch of his pages up for sale, and they went very quickly. But there was only really a handful of pages because much of his art is done digitally for time reasons. But to my eye, looking at the way that his art appears on the page, it's not an obvious difference between what is analog pen and pencil and ink versus what is created digitally. I don't know if you have a particular view on that, Tim.
I have friends who draw comics, and I have spoken to some artists, and I feel like a general consensus is that drawing digitally is faster and or offers more control, particularly for changing or fixing something. You're drawing a great pose, but the head's a little too big. If you've drawn it digitally, you just lasso it and shrink it. If you like a pose, but you actually need it to all sort of rotate 5 degrees because it doesn't quite have the oomph, you just highlight it and rotate it. But then you can't sell an object, and there are some artists who are doing both. They might sell their pencil roughs, which they then scan and sort of redraw in the computer, or they might pencil for real and scan it and clean it up and print it in blue line and then ink. So there are sort of real inks, but there's no there was never a physical pencil stage that you could with physical pencils. Artists want to make money selling the art, but first and foremost, they have to get through drawing all the pages. Something that also has happened a little bit more in, I'd say, the last 30 years is some artists draw smaller. They might draw on not 11 by 17 Bristol, right, with its 10 by 15 live area, but sort of a half size Bristol, which is faster. And I feel like a lot of times, maybe almost all the time, the reader can't tell. I'm always happy to see original art, and I'm always happy to see artists sell original art. But I have drawn digitally, and I have also drawn in a combination of ways, and I don't fault any artist for going the easier or faster way in this case.
I wondered whether, again, on this page that we were just looking at with the dreadnoughts, that there's this panel with Zorana, who's hanging on to the front of the Thunder Machine, and the scale of the Thunder Machine is a little bit wonky. It sort of makes it appear that the Thunder Machine is maybe sort of slightly more tank sized versus the scale of a human. And I wonder if maybe that's a little bit of a consequence of zooming right in and sort of maybe using digital tools to draw something a little bit smaller than you might do it on the paper, or maybe sort of use some of those kind of pinching tools to draw something at scale and then sort of drop it in, that kind of thing.
You're talking about page 6 with that reverse L-shaped panel,
Yeah.
the helicopter and the hospital. I don't know if Zorana's scale to the Thunder Machine, how related that is to zooming in and out. Certainly in a broad sense, artists who can zoom in, and I had this with my students who would animate in Adobe Animate, formerly called Flash, and they would zoom in and really noodle on tiny details that, or just draw very fine lines that when they're playing their animation just sort of go by too fast to matter. And I would say to them, if you are zooming in, you are wasting your time. You should only be drawing it. You should only be animating at 100%. I was saying this to my sophomore college animation students. So comic book artists might have a different set of personal rules. I do feel like in a general sense, the sort of risk of drawing digitally is that artists zoom in and draw detail that is either unnecessary or because there's so much fine detail and thin lines, looks out of place compared to other lines where a reader might realize that an artist, even with the smallest pen, would not have drawn that person or background or vehicle in so much detail. And there starts to be this little sort of disconnect for the reader. I think in the case of Mooneyham drawing Sabrina and the Thunder Machine here, it might be a little bit of exaggeration where the Thunder Machine is, there's not quite a fisheye lens on this panel, but he is definitely stretching some things as bigger, sort of the closer they are to the quote camera. I think this might just be him still getting used to all these like crazy vehicles in G.I. Joe. And, we have seen less in issues and sometimes in the cartoon that sometimes, a snowcat is just really, really tall, or a hiss is just a little bit too small, or its, front cannons are just a little too stubby. Yes. Sabrina is small in that panel.
So yeah, beyond that that little nitpick there, and the general appreciation of Mooneyham back on the book and the handsome quality of that art, my top sort of takeaway from the book really was, I guess some of the straightforwardness of it, and the fact, and it felt like quite a quick read. And I think for Hama's writing, we're very used to him having A plot and B plot and different locations. We still do get that A plot, B plot to a degree that we've got, the Baroness in the hospital storyline. We've got Serpentor versus Destro. We've got Cobra Commander and a Televiper in his control room and so on. So, but they are all concentrated in this one, in this Battle of Springfield location. So different locations, smaller locations within a slightly larger location. But I think that might be the first time that we've seen that for a while, of everyone in Springfield. And I guess this is what is being building up to, that now Destro and Serpentor are both on scene. So it does feel like we're very much kind of approaching the apex of this story, the sort of the peak where everyone is sort of all in situ, and at kind of the peak of the action.
I think the last time we saw everyone in Springfield was 275, which was the not double-sized but oversized wordless all splash page issue where every Joe comes to Springfield. But yes, you make a good point about Hama's B and C plots. A quote normal issue of G.I. Joe, I would expect 2/3 of this, what we read, and then it to cut to like the Arctic Circle, and Deep Six is in the Shark, and he's also with Cutter and like Lady J, and they're like starting the next subplot. Or back at the pit, Duke and Mainframe and Dialtone and Psych Out are like, well, how are we going to handle what's happening in Springfield? And I do like the immediacy that it's all happening here. And I think that's, I'm saying this emotionally and having not surveyed a lot of comics. I think Hama sort of does this when his storylines converge, when his sort of battles come to a head. And there are, what this issue also has is a lot of particular grudges, sort of one person versus another person. They have not gotten along. They are the enemies of this pairing, right? So, on the final page, it's certainly Destro versus Serpentor Khan, but up until then, it has felt like Cobra Commander versus Serpentor Khan. But you also have this sort of like lower tier of, is it a mutated Frag Viper who's on page 1, and the sort of fake battle art, the fake Cobra Commander, the sort of imposter, but someone who's there on purpose, and it was not a surprise after very long. The person who's pretending to be battle armor Cobra Commander, and then you've got even a little bit of this. It's less one person against another, but sort of there's this tension of Zartan with the Dreadnoks and the Baroness and the Joes and all these Vipers that may or may not let them into the hospital, because in various combinations, lots of people in these groupings have tried to kill each other, specifically shot each other in the past, betrayed each other, also teamed up. And that's what you get when you have series run for 100, 200, 300 issues. My other sort of top-down, I have three other top-down reactions to this issue. One is I like being reminded that Springfield is a civilian town. I mean, even though it's run by and co-opted by or built by a terrorist army, and everyone in it is sort of in Cobra, you also have the nurse at the front desk at the hospital, or you have the nurse who's pushing the gurney in the hallway in the hospital, who says, who chastises Zartan for pushing past and yelling out that his patient is the most important, and they mention the high school, and they mention the athletic fields, and they mention the infrastructure, not the nurses, various characters in the issue. And, you see the, okay, so that's one point. Two, a lot of vehicles, so many vehicles in this issue. And, a hiss and a hiss two, and a stinger, and rattlers and mambas and the thunder machine and remind me what the big cargo helicopter is called,
Aspid,
and the Aspid, and the Cobra Claw, and did I say Night Ravens, and the modified stealths. It's great. And also what I think is a first appearance of the Iron Grenadiers Mars, what do you call it? It looks sort of like a 747, but it's got sort of shield helicarrier concentric circles on its wings. Like it's got sort of VTOL turbines. I don't know what it is, but I like it. Because
yeah, I guess it's their transport
their cargo
craft.
Yes.
Yeah, for all of this cargo, because like on the next page you have all of the front opening up and all of these demons, dominators, and razorbacks sort of unloading out of the front.
Three more vehicles you just
three more vehicles
which appear in this issue. And listeners, if you know someone who read G.I. Joe in the past, and maybe they tried out some of the other versions, the other continuities, and you've been trying to get them back into a Real American Hero, and something about the previous 10 issues at Skybound haven't worked, or there's too much. I can't. It's Energon Universe. There's too much. I can't hand them this issue because so much happens here, and it feels like it feels nostalgic's not the right word. It feels familiar because you have these very different factions fighting. You have the Destro faction. You have the Dreadnoks with some ninja. You have Serpentor Khan. You have Cobra Commander. And I'll say it a second time. I'm actually really surprised that we don't cut back to the pit or Duke just for two panels. Duke in a plane with Wild Bill. It's like we're heading to Springfield. We're trying to help out.
And in some ways, this kind of is like a parallel to back all the way to the original Cobra Civil War, which I guess let's not forget had Serpentor versus a battle armored Cobra Commander as the two main adversaries, on a grand scale. And that's where sort of Destro and his Iron Grenadiers first showed up. with a lot of promise that they sort of rocked up onto the beach and unloaded, but then they were kind of there, as a threatening force rather than an actual invading force, because they didn't really end up getting involved in the conflict. So I guess here is the final payoff of that original promise, where we do have a full army of Destro's forces sort of weighing into this civil war.
Yes. This and the story not only alludes to, repeats the Cobra Civil War from 1987. It also alludes to
one issue of which, issue 75, had the Baroness on the front cover in the similar position as this one, as you pointed out.
It also alludes to issues 49 and 50 from the Marvel run, the Battle of Springfield, because this is a battle of or for Springfield. And on the first page of this issue, the first panel, the first narration box, it says, "The Battle of Springfield is raging." And I thought, oh, is this an error? Should this have read "The Second Battle of Springfield is Raging" or "The New Battle of Springfield is Raging"? And then I thought, you know what? Instead of frowning and saying like, oh, Larry Hama is repeating himself, or oh, the editors should have caught it, or oh, this story is doing something we've seen before, I thought of The Simpsons and Uncanny X-Men, where you have these sets of characters who go on regular adventures every month or every week for years and then decades. And yes, if you list everything that has ever happened to Homer Simpson, well, he became an astronaut. Well, he became he brewed his own beer. He went to the Himalayas. It's like, well, how does he have time to actually work his job? He met the president, he met the other president, he met Aerosmith, just on and on and on. It becomes silly and unrealistic, but I want those characters, your mileage may vary about season 34 and season 35, but let's go back to the 90s, right? Season 5, season 10. I want these characters to stick around, and I want them to keep having adventures and, entertain me. And, it is very possible that if you have 311 G.I. Joe comics, and then you throw in all the, yearbooks and special missions and, silent option and etc. in the Hama continuity, that you're going to have more than one Battle of Springfield. And what I really want is for this battle to be as interesting, as exciting as it can be, and not repeat any obvious moments from the other one. And then I'm just not going to worry about it. Because when I watch The Simpsons and Homer goes on some crazy adventure, right? Like, oh, Homer is a manager for a country singer, and he's helping her record an album or play in a bar, right? I don't think, wait a minute, that's not realistic. He should be at the nuclear power plant. Same with X-Men. How many times have the X-Men come to terms with Magneto, and Magneto has said, you know what, I'm going to help you and I will lead the team or train the younger students. And then, 2 years later, he's a villain again. The humans are wrong. I have to exterminate the humans and I can't work with you, X-Men. And if, you're my enemies. And then, give it 2 years. And that's just kind of what you get. Okay. My third additional overall comment for this issue was I was really, really pleased with the giant first panel that stretches across pages 2 and 3, and I'm sure Hama's plot referred to this, and somewhere he sort of called out to artist Mooneyham. It's like, you got to show this from above, or, maybe Hama drew a map, like a little diagram. But not only can we see a lot of Springfield here, right? Like the football field, and then the baseball diamond, and like the high school or whatever it is. Not only can we see very specific landmarks, but what has just been referred to in these 2 pages of Cobra Commander Okay, the Techno Viper, not Jeffrey, on the previous page. Cobra Commander, we are being overrun. You must leave the field. And I thought, oh, he means field in a general sense, the battlefield. No, he
Field
means
of battle.
He means the football field, right? Because
Yeah.
what is on this panel behind battle armor, not Cobra Commander, and some Techno Vipers? 2 Hiss 2s. Okay, and then he says, fake Cobra Commander says, negative, we must assure that the tactical withdrawal succeeds in drawing the cyborg army into our ambuscado at the high school. And then he continues, and you turn the page, and he says, to that end, we must execute a flying holding action to blunt the impetus of the charge. Otherwise, if we offer no resistance, the cyborgs will suspect a trap. And what do we see on this actual panel? If you're watching this episode right now, you can see it. If you're holding the comic, this is panel 2 on page 1. I see a hiss 2 with 2 stingers behind it, driving in one direction on the field toward a bunch of soldiers. And then to the right, on the other side of that silhouetted plume of smoke, I see a bunch of Hiss 2s driving away toward the football field, right? And Hama is figuring out the geography, the choreography of this, right? In a comic, you might have the physical choreography of, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow fighting in a hallway or in a room, where they are in relationship to the door, or one goes up the stairs, then the other follows, and you have another doorway. You draw the doorway in a different shape, so we know it's not the same doorway as the first one, because then you'd get confused. Wait, did they go down the stairs? Some of it might be very small, and some of it might be very large with a bunch of big vehicles, and you kind of need a map. You need a diagram. You need a bird's eye view. You need a 3/4 high looking down angle. And I turned this page and I said, yes.
Yeah, and we've seen it before from Hama's postings on Facebook and so on, so that who will do like lay out some assistance to the artist to better explain the geography of a place. A drawing in that case can paint a lot more than a description of it. And I'm thinking of in Snake Hunt. He did a diagram of a particular corridor to kind of explain, how that was laid out and the various sort of avenues leading off of it. And I've seen similar sort of layouts of kind of compounds to describe to an artist how he envisions the geography of a place working. So yeah, that's a good shout. I can completely visualize that is something that he added onto his script for this one.
The funny thing about drawing G.I. Joe comics is that many artists drawing G.I. Joe comics aren't sitting on a bunch of G.I. Joe toys, right? Because they're comics artists and they're coming to G.I. Joe late, or they're drawing it in one of those years that the toys aren't a big deal, or Hasbro's not shipping them toys anymore. They're just sending them links to websites or JPEGs as reference. But the funny thing is that G.I. Joe figures are a really good size if you are drawing any comic and you want to pose some, I don't mean pose for battle, like fighting poses. I mean, just to sort of if you have a table and you put one figure over here and you put another figure over there, and you sort of lean down closer, you stand up higher, or you take a piece of paper and you cut a rectangle out of it. So you have a little viewfinder and you are composing your panel, your finger quotes shot. You could do it with popsicle sticks. You could do it with, chess pieces. You could do it with really any action figure. But it's funny because if you're drawing a G.I. Joe comic, and some people who draw G.I. Joe comics have a lot of G.I. Joe toys, you can just do it with your G.I. Joe toys. And it doesn't have to be, if you have Serpentor Khan fighting Destro in a hallway, you can use any figures. You could use, Jinx and then a re-release of Jinx. And it doesn't matter if you're just trying to block where your, sort of skinny verticals are, your people in your, sort of horizontals, your panels. I just want to call out, if you can go back to that the panel that I was talking about, where we're looking down at all these vehicles leaving the. Can you go to the next page? Yeah. So that Cobra Commander, that not Cobra Commander in the battle armor on the back of the Hiss 2, man, what a pose. All he's doing is saying, we've only got one Hiss and 2 Stingers to pull this off, so we have to be very convincing, right? And again, like in the previous panel, there's 1 Hiss and 2 Stingers. Okay, but there's so much oomph to this pose. And there are a lot of comics artists who draw exciting action comics and who draw not so exciting action comics who don't draw poses like this. And in some other episodes, when I've talked about a character not having a lot of tension, or I want more contrapposto, or I want more John Buscema, I want more, twist to their spine. It's like a lunge, right? He's not hopping back onto the Hiss. He's just standing there. But he's not just pointing. He's really pointing. He's sort of hurling his arm forward in space, and there's sort of an X shape, right, where his left arm sort of connects to his right leg. His right leg connects to his left leg, connects to his right arm. And this happens all over this issue, where when characters jump, when they point, when they fire their weapons, when they yell, their muscles are taut, T-A-U-T, and I love it. And that is something that Mooneyham does really well, and it's very exciting.
Very good. I did have a thought about this armored Cobra Commander, which is kind of a little bit of a prediction here that, Cobra Commander is a bit of a sort of a self-centered, thin-skinned kind of individual, likes to be the center of attention. And there is this element of this battle armored Cobra Commander being quite brave and heroic and leading the battle and rallying the troops and them sort of being inspired by his behavior. And there's this panel on page, I think it's 4, where the Televiper, calls it out, and he says, "The troopers are cheering the CG in your battle armor." And I wonder to the extent that possibly Cobra Commander might get a little bit jealous and want to see this CG come to a sticky end at some point, hogging his glory.
I was wondering if maybe this battle armor, not Cobra Commander, if the real commander wants him to die, so he can fake his own death and disappear for a little while. And I don't know that actually logically supports what he's doing in Springfield in being the center of attention and defending himself and sort of defending the city. But just in terms of Hama trying to create interesting things for himself to write around. Well, what if Cobra Commander tries to disappear? What do Destro and Zartan do when they show up if Cobra Commander seems to be dead or has disappeared? How could Cobra Commander regroup even more powerful than before after his city has been, somewhat assaulted? But at the same time, I'm reminded from the Battle Armor Cobra Commander file card that this armor combines flexible bulletproof polymer fabrics with beryllium steel plate components, and that it's solvent resisted and ray shielded, and that it can take a direct hit from a heavy machine gun. And so I don't doubt that someone somewhere on this field of battle can fire a missile at him or just keep shooting at his elbow where there's a joint and kill the guy inside. But he should be hard to kill. All this said, if Hama doesn't go in this direction and the CG just quietly retires and goes back to being a CG, or Cobra Commander keeps using him and manipulating him for a few issues, or if he doesn't die, if Cobra Commander doesn't disappear, those are also cool with me.
Yeah, there's also a moment as well where the Cobras are trying to protect the battle armored Cobra commander after all of this heroism that he's showing, and in a couple of places almost that they want to get him out of there and protect him and get him having him head back, and so it's sort of quite interesting that they are sort of trying to almost herd him back to where the actual Cobra commander is.
But then, do you want to do the line?
What was there's this piece where it's like, where are you taking me? Where are you taking me, Techno Viper? We need to get you to the safety of the command battle bunker. I will not lead from the rear. I have to rally the troops. It's sounding more like Serpentor than from the normal Cobra commander.
So,
but yeah, he's being strafed, and then the actual Cobra commander is kind of indicating almost the opposite,
right?
Almost the opposite behavior, where as his troops are sort of coming under fire and sort of losing that battle, he's it's worse than I thought. Shouldn't we send the reserves to the bunker forces to relieve the main force? Are you insane? They're needed here to protect me! Smack. Quite the contrast.
That's my favorite line of the issue. The fact that he's smacking the Televiper while saying it is even better. And I haven't talked about Francesco Segala's great work on this issue recently. The background color, right? The background just drops out for this panel. It's just the foreground character and then just a little bit of stuff, just three little, desks with monitors around the Televiper. And then there's no sort of further wall in the background with other grooves and panels and screens and buttons, right? There's just no background. And Segala makes it a bright orange, not a deep, like the fruit orange. It's a sort of half orange, it's a yellow orange. And if you're reading this digitally, I don't think it quite hits in the same way. The version on paper almost glows, and I'm a sucker for a panel in comics that has a moment of someone getting particularly angry or reacting in shock, or giving a rousing speech, to the whole panel or the whole background just getting knocked out in some bold color. And it happens a couple times in this issue. It happens on a panel with a bunch of rattlers and mambas flying. It happens back on that page 2 and 3 spread under the panels that I was talking about, where we're looking down at the football field, where Cobra Commander has got that very dramatic pose that I waxed about for 3 whole minutes on the back of the Hiss tank. There's just a panel of Gatling gun machine gun fire shooting up the Hiss 2 tank that Cobra Commander is jumping off of in retreat. And the Hiss is colored properly. Cobra Commander in the battle armor is colored properly. Sound effect is yellow. The bullets ripping in and past are yellow. And then the background is just knocked out in this bold red with a little bit of a darker red texture on the right side. And that in some ways makes this one panel the most important panel of these 2 pages, because it's the most different from the rest, right? And there are all these different reasons why different panels on this 2-page spread become the most important, right? The previous panel, where the Frag Viper mutate has just fired off his Gatling gun, right? Like, that's sort of the most energetic, and we're looking up at him, and he's sort of knocked back in a color, and something of his artwork pushes past the line. Anyway, so I'll say another thing about Segala, since I'm talking about his colors. I'll just move to that.
I'll just point out, it's one of the cool that panel with the Frag Viper and that minigun is one of the coolest panels of the book. It's we can just stop and linger and say that's cool.
Yes, he's very big. He's a big, muscular, mutated man monster, and he's holding this giant, crazy weapon. And we don't know what he pulled. He's picking it up from the ground, but we don't know specifically what it's from, right? I guess we don't have to.
Yeah, presumably one of the other fallen mutates.
Yes. Okay.
No longer needs it.
So Segala does this thing that he does every issue, which I really like, where every scene or every location has a different color palette. And he'll make some exceptions, right? So that panel of Cobra Commander jumping off the tank, background's all red. The panel before it with the mutated Frag Viper and the Gatling gun, that's all in yellows and pale oranges. But generally, every 2 or 3 or 4 pages, a scene has a set of colors, and then the camera cuts to somewhere else, and then it has a different set of colors. So, for example, Cobra Commander inside the community center in downtown Springfield, in this command center, talking to some televipers, surrounded by big monitors and computer stuff. These scenes are all colored in this pale green. But then the following page, where we're back outside in the battle, is more pale orange, offset by all the blues of these Cobra people and aircraft. And you could say, well, yeah, fire is, red, orange, yellow. Of course, this page should be sort of orangey, right? And I don't think Segala is like reinventing the wheel here. He's just creating a lot of visual interest and helping to differentiate one place from another and one mood from another, right? So, then you turn the page again and we're still outside somewhere nearby. And it's that scene you talked about with the Dreadnoks and the injured Baroness and the Thunder Machine and the helicopter and the hospital. And a little of this, like the Thunder Machine on the bottom of the page, Scarlet and Zartan on the bottom of the page on that motorcycle, they are dulled out in sort of a blue cast because they're basically in shadow, because you can see the black inking on the hospital building under the helicopter, right? That's not a cast shadow from the helicopter. That's based on where the sun is in the sky. But this whole page has sort of pink and blue going on. And then the following page, where Zartan now gets almost inside and then inside. I guess technically he's still outside because he's under the sort of like the rain cover for where ambulances pull up. So it's using some of that sort of pink, brown, orange from the previous page, but now there's this blue, right, which is introduced because that's going to be a color inside the hospital. You can see it on the top of this page, right next
the doorway.
Right next to the word balloon that says, "Anybody going to stop me?" The window in the door is blue, and then Zartan and Baroness are illuminated from below by this blue. It's as if like it's nighttime and they're at a hotel standing next to a pool, and the swimming pool has a light on inside it, right? And then you turn the page, you turn a couple pages, and you go to inside the hospital, and it's got that blue and aqua cast. And then the page after that, right, it's greens because Serpentorcon, right? The ground under Serpentorcon, the dead mutate in front of him, there's no story reason for them to be green. They're green because they agree with Serpentorcon and because physically all the foreground stuff here is green, so that the middle ground stuff, the dull blue of all the Cobras, and then the background stuff, the sky and the plains, which is, I don't know, a dull brown blue with some orange, just so that Segala can separate physically. He can push elements further and closer from the reader, right? And I love it. And at the same time, he's not over rendering, which some G.I. Joe color artists have and some colorists do. He's not inventing light sources. There aren't like shiny highlights on everything, his fingers and his wrist and his arm and his snake cowl and his cape. And Segala we talk about this every issue, he's using these subtle but really welcome dot screen textures in some of his background colors just to add variety and texture and depth. So if you turn the page one more time, excuse me, Mark, if you turn the page 2 more times, where the page of Cobra Commander is pointing, but it's actually Zartan in the operating room. Go one more, if you can. Okay, so if you're looking at this on a screen, if you're watching this episode, I don't know that it quite comes through. It just looks like the blue behind Cobra Commander. It's actually Zartan. In that third panel where he's saying, "Can one of you finish this operation?" ... It just looks like there's, some variety in that blue. But if you were holding the comic book and you get really close, you see dots. And it's totally fine that Mooneyham did not draw a background in this panel. It's not lazy. It's not unclear. Sometimes you just don't have to draw a background because the previous panel or last time we checked in on this scene, the artist established visually where the character is. But just as as an allusion to how comics were printed in the 80s, and certainly most people reading Skybound's Real American Hero are thinking of Marvel G.I. Joe 80s comics. And also because it just adds texture and sort of dulls the very shiny, perfectly flat white paper. And just because it adds some visual interest, Segala's use of these Ben Day dot textures, these screens, these patterns of dots, and they're really subtle. So great.
Very good. Where to next, Tim?
We could point out that the page that you have shown previously of Destro flying his despoiler with some Mars cargo planes behind him, it's almost a full splash page. Chris Mooneyham signs that panel, and then he writes, "After Rogers and McLeod." And he's doing that because this page is an homage, is a swipe of the cover to Marvel issue 87, which is Destro, Iron Grenadier's Destro, in his despoiler, flying at us with a purple background and a bunch of anti-gravity pods around him. And so what Mooneyham has done here is redrawn that cover here as a panel, which I think is fun. It's also nice that he credits the artist. And it's funny because the original cover, 87, which was published in 1989, it always struck me as Marshall Rogers definitely drawing like a toy. Like, I feel like he was holding the toy with a figure in it and drawing that for his reference. I don't quite get the fantasy of like a real man with a real cape in a real flying machine that's got like missiles and guns on it. It feels like a toy based on sort of how he draws it, the energy of it, the proportions. But I've still always loved that cover. Anyway, so here is the third sort of major reference that this issue makes. This issue refers back to the first Cobra Civil War. It refers back to the Battle of Springfield. It refers back to the cover to issue 87.
Good spot. Good spot indeed. And there's another reference that well, it's not necessarily a reference intentionally. It's just a similarity. I noticed that we've got this cool almost splash on that last page of the book with that sort of confrontation between Serpentor and Destro, and that put me in mind of another illustration, which was from Batman.
Can I guess?
Oh, go on.
Is it a Frank Frazetta painting? Because smart artists are often swiping Frank Frazetta compositions.
It wasn't. It was actually Batman versus Predator, which was by
that's Andy Kubert.
Andy
right?
Kubert.
Andy Kubert inked by Adam Kubert.
That's right.
Well, the series was not the covers.
And I think they taught him at the Kubert School. So and obviously, a key sort of visual inspiration for Mooneyham is all three Kuberts really, and yeah, it's one of those things that is definitely not a swipe. But you can kind of see the similar sort of energy there of the lean of Batman there versus the lean of Destro, and the sort of the I guess the flapping cloak of Batman versus the cloak of Serpentor.
Now that you have called some attention to this final panel in this issue with Destro and Serpentor, I don't think this is a swipe of some other famous image, because I feel like, homage. I feel like Mooneyham, if he did it once, he would sign his name and credit the original artist.
Fair. Yeah.
Time. But I do think, now that you've pointed out, now that I'm really looking at this Destro pose and this Serpentor pose, I wonder if there is some famous fantasy art or comic book cover that these poses also slightly allude to, besides the Andy Kubert image you just showed. And I wonder if any of our listeners, if this reminds them of something, if they have ideas, or if they can find a visual that feels like another almost match, let us know, because that would be fun. But I do feel like there's something about this Destro pose that I have seen somewhere before. And this is not to say that Mooneyham can't come up with exciting, two characters facing off poses on his own. This is to say that artists are always looking for good ideas from, photos and other artists and movies. And there's just sort of an ongoing cycling of, references and ideas without it being, cheating or plagiarism or lazy. Okay, my other comments. I have two thoughts about this final page. Can you go to the full view? That second panel where Destro flies his despoiler into Serpentor back, and also, hey, there's a Segala knocks out the background in one color. It's all red. Whomp. I thought, oh man, Serpentor is totally dead, because if someone flew, how fast do you think the despoiler's going? 30 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. Okay, so I guess Destro's sort of landing it and sort of crashing it, because in the next panel, it's diagonal and on fire. Yeah. And then the panel after, the big panel, there's definitely some fire behind him. So, okay, maybe Destro was slowing down so that he could land and crash without killing himself. Maybe it's more like 15 miles an hour. And there's a seatbelt that we don't see, and a couple of little airbags to protect his, I guess, everything waist down. But I did think, it's like, okay, Hama can certainly exaggerate, and Mooneyham can certainly exaggerate sort of how powerful or impactful any one punch or kick or, explosion or, bullet blast is. And, Serpentor is a superhuman. I do feel like, realistically, visually, I don't want him to be sort of limping or like holding his back as if he's got, a headache, a backache in that final exciting panel. But I do feel like Serpentor needs a little more recovery here, having just had a flying missile machine slam into him. But let's brush that aside for a moment. Let's pretend that, 40 seconds pass between the panel of impact and this panel. I'm here to see your plans. I'm here to see that your plans of conquest go down in flames. Man, what a badass pose. That Serpentor with his legs spread and his arms folded and his head down a little bit, and his, very dramatic cape blowing one way and the smoke blowing the other way. Actually, I don't know if that would happen, but man, does that make a cool visual. And in the same way, so my final thought on this page is, in the same way that this issue is really focused, as you said, in one general location, sort of 3 or 4 places around it, and all the current subplots have converged here. I thought, oh man, I think the first 4 pages of the next issue are going to be really focused of just these two guys fighting each other. And I feel like we haven't, I could be wrong. The next issue may go in a completely different direction. Artan may drive up in disguise as the, Cobra Commander in the battle mask, not the battle armor, and say, Destro, get on the thunder machine that I just grabbed. Let's get out of here. We'll shoot this guy from afar. Don't punch him. He's stronger than you. But I didn't think, oh man, I bet the next issue is just going to be half a big, exciting fight between, this character that we know and love from a long time ago, but hasn't been in the comic much recently, and this, vicious, weird imposter monster.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to come back to that thought this time next month, because I do have a little bit of insight, because I do look ahead at the Skybound previews. So typically the week following release, Skybound give a 4-page preview of the next issue. So whether you are on track or not, we shall see.
I will have you know, I have also received that email and I deleted it. I did not open the attachment. I do not want to read those 4 pages. I want to wait until I've got the comic book in my hand.
But how will you know whether to read it or not otherwise, Tim?
I do appreciate getting that kind of email from Skybound. I am more excited to read the physical object. Another thing that I didn't mention that I feel like I sort of covered without saying it, which is both. Okay, there are 2 or 3 panels in this whole issue where there are 2 panels in this whole issue where we see red triangles and blue circles on a green grid. These are 2 small inset panels where in the Springfield Community Center, where Cobra Commander, the real Cobra Commander, is talking to this one or these 2 televipers, right? And he even refers to it. What does he say? He says something like, put it up on the checkerboard, right? Show me the situational graphics.
Yep.
How could my brilliant plan fail so miserably? Show me the situational graphics. And then the line you did before, God, it's worse than I thought. That's really fun. And that's Hama calling it out and describing it. And that's Mooneyham drawing it. Easy panels to draw, I bet. And then I bet actually Segala didn't do much for these panels. I bet that's almost solely the work of flatter Sabrina del Grosso. Because it's not really any rendering. I think there might be a little bit of a Ben-Day texture in the green, but it's just really fun and helps to visually explain what Cobra Commander is talking about, what Cobra Commander and Serpentor Khan are doing in the issue, what Hama is trying to do in the issue. And I know I've said this before, but I always enjoy saying it, and I bet our listeners half enjoy hearing it. There isn't any comic like G.I. Joe. Reading a G.I. Joe comic is unlike reading other comics because you have all these vehicles in a way that, Punisher has a van, the X-Men have a Blackbird, but I don't sort of know and love the Blackbird the way that I do like the Millennium Falcon. But the Millennium Falcon had like a movie to romance it and some cool toys. But I don't feel like there've been a lot of comics where I'm like, yes, the Millennium Falcon is equally a character here. But there's all this setup in G.I. Joe comics for vehicles where, a vehicle driver shows up for half an issue and, talks about how great the vehicle is. And then on top of that, Hama has these characters that he gets to use for a long time. And Hama has this very pointed interest in gear, weapons and distances and sort of the realism of how long it would take a plane to go from one place to another. And then, Hama reads a lot of books, has read a lot of books, and is interested in history, and that includes, military history and the history of war. And okay, here's an example. All these X-Men comics from the last 5 years that took place on the island of Krakoa, right? Which sort of starts after House of X, sort of the uber like Jonathan Hickman era, even though he did not write the majority of it. You have this island, and I think we've seen a map of the island. Also, there's another Krakoa. I don't understand. And I read all those comics, and we know where like the bar is, and we know where the like fight arena is, and we know where the council meets. But I don't get a lot of a sense in those X-Men comics, those X titles, of sort of how long it takes to get from the Lagoon bar to the quiet council's, round table with the 12 seats. And I feel like, okay, you could say, well, there's no literal panel in an issue of G.I. Joe where someone says it takes me 13 minutes to get from the Springfield Community Center to the high school. No, but I do feel like Hama is keeping track of this stuff in a way and writing his stories. This is the point I wanted to get to. He's writing his stories around them. It's not just like, okay, the bad guys come to Springfield, the other bad guys are already there, and also the good guys show up, and I'm gonna like smash the toys together. It's like, where is everyone going, right? Okay, well, if I have these three vehicles and they turn right on the football field, right? Hama's keeping track of it because he wants Mooneyham to keep track of it because he wants us to keep track of it, and that's fun. And these two panels with the triangles, the red triangles and the blue circles are just another small little example of that. And Hama didn't invent it, and Mooneyham isn't innovating. We've seen this in movies and TV and some comics. I just like it.
Very cool.
I have a question for you. This Cobra Commander, the glasses with the long hair and the Fu Manchu, or just the long mustache and the beret and the trench coat. Is it issue 55? Is it Unmaskings when we first see Cobra Commander like this?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't have that issue in front of me, but Cobra Commander and Destro are underground, and do they come out in a mall and they go to a costume shop? Is that what it is?
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Cobra Commander comes out wearing this. And at the time, my brother and I were never quite sure, is this Cobra Commander in a disguise and we're not meant to know what he looks like? Or is this actually what he looks like and the disguise is sort of the hat and the coat and maybe the glasses? And so then my follow-up question, Mark, if you could just muse on this or correct me, because we've seen Cobra Commander dressed like this a couple times since, I think in Marvel and in IDW and at Skybound now. Mm-hmm. So is this Cobra Commander's go-to disguise when he needs to be out of his uniform so that Hama can have him be a sort of a normal person, not in his like toy costume, but we don't know what he looks like and his subordinates don't know what he looks like? Or is this just kind of what he looks like?
Good question. Yeah, I think they sort of have their cake and eat it almost. It's like I think this is disguise. It means that Cobra Commander can be out around places and people don't necessarily realize that he's Cobra Commander. He's not got all of the, the full-on hood or mask and Cobra logos, etc. But if the only time that you're outside of your normal costume, you wear exactly the same disguise, that kind of just becomes the way that you look, right? It's so who's to say? Does his hair, has he got a long ponytail? Has he actually got a moustache, or does he sort of don that each time? Who knows? I think initially the way that it was presented was they, I think, went into a like a wig shop and a hat shop, and they picked up these things, and it, it was very much implied that it was a fake moustache and hair. But maybe he just liked the look, and he has grown his hair out. He has grown the moustache, and that is the way that he looks under his mask.
I also feel like when he keeps showing up like this, Hama's maybe chuckling because it's kind of a joke, because this disguise is so disguisey. He's wearing a beret and he's got a fake mustache and a ponytail. And go ahead.
And also it allows for dramaturgy. Tim, you get to see, a bit more of his face. You get more of the expression in his eyes, and he can pull faces using his mouth, and you can see dramatic shots of his teeth.
Let me see if I can do it. It makes it easier for dramaturgy. No, I can't do it.
Dramaturgy.
Listeners, we are both trying to sound like Larry Hama answering a question at a panel on a convention. On a panel at a convention. This is a good point that because Hama could have easily had the battle armor imposter out in the field, and then this guy in the community center talking to the two televipers just in his blue hood. Or the new variation of the blue hood where the hood part is tucked into his collar and it's kind of still a hood. He doesn't have to be in a trench coat. I feel like he's in a trench coat because he might run away. He might need to disappear into the crowds out in Springfield. But yes, you make a good point that the panels of him freaking out both positively and negatively in this issue have a different punch because we can see his face. But I do feel like Hama's sort of like, okay, here's the joke. If, as you said, every time he goes out in disguise, he's wearing the same disguise, it's sort of like Arbco and Broca Beach. We know that that's actually Cobra. We know that that's a front. We know that this is Cobra Commander. But I think everyone else in the world in this comic book, if they saw this guy, maybe even like Destro, who has seen him wear this before, maybe even some Joes who I don't remember in issue 55 if they saw him wear this. I feel like this is Hama's shorthand for Cobra Commander is in disguise and no one knows it's Cobra Commander. No one knows it's Cobra Commander, except for you, gentle reader. And also, I just want to go back to this joke. It's like Cobra Commander, between panels or pages before the previous issue, right? Because it's the previous issue where we're introduced to the battle armor guy who's not actually Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander, between off panel, grabs a CG and says, I need you to wear this costume. I need you to wear this battle armor and go lead the troops. Keep me safe so I can be back here. And the guy says, okay. And then the real Cobra Commander turns around, opens up a drawer, pulls out his John Lennon glasses and his beret and his fake Fu Manchu and his wig and goes over to a closet and pulls out the trench coat. It's like, how many of these does he have? Does he have his disguise sort of in all the places where in safe houses, in various Cobra headquarters? This is why I find it funny, because in the same way that, the G.I. Joe costumes aren't realistic for every environment, like the Joes would all just wear the same thing when they go to the Arctic, but that's no fun for me. I want to see, maybe Quick Kick shouldn't be in bare feet, but I kind of want to see his red throwing star chest belt strap, like in G.I. Joe the movie. I want to see that over his white winter coat, because that's what makes him Quick Kick. And I don't want him to wear a hat. I want to see his Karate Kid, forehead band. And so this is almost like this is the symbol for Cobra Commander in disguise, even if it's not literally Cobra Commander in disguise.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap this one up?
Lots of sound effects. I love it. Lots of sound effects in this issue. And there's a really exciting, dramatic letter that's sort of longer than a lot of letters, where I'm not going to read it. I'll let you all experience it for yourself. But it's a different kind of letter. Letter writer Kenneth J. Wilcott tells a story of the Flint action figure he had as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
I kept waiting sort of because it didn't happen at the beginning of the letter. I kept thinking, well, at the end of the letter, he's going to come back around to, and I'm so glad that Flint is in this comic. The comic's so great. I'm so glad Hama's writing the comic yet. But it doesn't come back to the comic. He just ends his story with his action figure. And I thought, okay, so you can write a longer letter and it might get printed, because there's a conventional wisdom that if you write, like, what is it, like a 5-sentence letter, what's your formula, Mark? You say something you like, you say something you want changed and you ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's my formula. I say
Yeah,
35
that's a good
things.
formula.
Say 35 things I don't like, no things I like, and I tell them to do that. And then in the rest of the letters page, since we tend to cover the letters page, there aren't any familiar names that I know of, and no big revelations. Right?
No, not this time. I had a hammer time. Do you want a short jingle or a long jingle?
Long.
Time to beat the soles of your boots with my face. Sucking chest wounds, red ninjas, brain scanners, rubber oozes, blue ninjas. And then some more sucking chest wounds. Hammer time.
Hammer time. My hammer time will be shorter than that jingle, I think. The hammer time is a fine red mist. So the Rattler pilot is talking about attacking Serpentor's forces. He says, "Ha we'll." He's saying it over a microphone, so let's try and see. We'll reduce them to a fine red mist.
He's shrunken down and hiding inside a can. He's the size of an action figure inside an empty can.
I'm in a can. Help me. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, fine red mist. I think that is a fine hammerism. So
I think a minor one might be on the previous page, where one of the mutated vipers says they drew us into their killing field and decimated us.
Mm-hmm.
I think Hama has referred to a killing field and decimation before, although maybe not enough times to warrant the Hama time appellation.
Stop! Hammer time!
Sure.
If you're just listening and not watching, Mark just did a close-up on the panel that I just read.
Very good. Should we do a score for this one? Closing thoughts and score it?
8.
8. Yeah,
So
well, that's good.
It's fast and immediate. Lots of characters. Focus on the bad guys and the other bad guys. Mooneyham's back and in top form. Did I mention there are a lot of sound effects? Love the color work. Good setup for next issue. Yeah, I will say I was a little, and we're not going to talk about next month's cover because that's the first 20 minutes of our next month's episode. But I was surprised that the final page of this is so setting up Destro versus Serpentor, and without getting into it, because that's next episode, the inside back cover of this issue shows a very cool Andy Kubert drawing that is not Destro fighting Serpentor. So when I got to the inside back cover, I thought, oh, okay, some other stuff is happening next issue. Good. But also, I want to see Destro fight Serpentor.
And also, who knows what will actually be in the inside when it comes to this cover, because covers are typically done a little bit in advance of the rest of the book. So it might just be talking to the continued ongoing Battle of Springfield and the characters there rather than necessarily the events of the issue. But they've tended to be tracking pretty close. So we shall see when the mission continues on December 26th, 2024. That's issue 312. And we'll be discussing that when it comes out.
Just a quick note for listeners who hit their local comic book store on New Comics Wednesday. New Comics Wednesday in December is December 25th, which is a federal holiday. Your local comic book store, A, will probably be closed, and B, New Comics Day that week is Thursday. That's why the 26th rings a little differently in my brain.
It's Boxing Day over here in the UK, which is also a bank holiday. We'll have to figure out when we can actually record for that one, Tim. With all of our holiday commitments, we'll figure that one out offline. So you scored it highly. I think I'm probably going in similar, maybe 7.5, something like that. It's a solid issue, lots of nice action. Good to see Chris Mooneyham back. We have been in this place in Springfield in this battle for quite a long time. I am looking forward to a change of scenery at some point. And I guess from a storytelling aspect or story aspect, I felt like I wasn't necessarily surprised a huge amount that the story is kind of going in the direction that you would expect it to go, of these different forces converging. We did know that Serpentor was on his way. We did know that Destro was on his way. So them turning up wasn't necessarily such a surprise to me, even if it was, dealt with in quite a dramatic way. A high point that we kind of alluded to earlier was the sheer volume of different vehicles that made it into this issue. I wonder if it's record breaking or certainly up there in the high scores with the number of vehicles. I count 16. Maybe Tim, you can just count on your fingers as I go here. We've got a Hiss 2, Stinger, a Rattler, Mamba, Thunder Machine, various motorbikes, Aspid, Stealth Fighter, did I say Mamba? I've got Night Raven. Couldn't read my own handwriting. Claw, Despoiler, the Mars Transport Plane, Demons, Dominators, another vehicle that I can't read the lettering of, and Razorbacks. Let me just double check what I'm meant to be saying there.
I got distracted. That's either 16 or 17.
Yeah. What did
Listeners,
I say?
let us know in the Facebook comments.
It was when Destro turned up and they said Demons, Dominators, and Razorbacks. That's the final. Those are the Destro vehicles. Yeah, so 16-ish. Good going to Mr. Hama for fitting them in. Good going to Diana for tracking, for probably helping with keeping track of all of those vehicles and providing reference. And well done to Chris Mooneyham for drawing them, and Francesco Segala for colouring them. Hard work keeping track of so many different vehicles, which are, as you say, characters in their own right. So next time on Talking Joe, we will be continuing to cover ARAH as it comes out. We will also be covering the latest issues from the Skybound Energon universe. We're wrapping up our Devil's Due coverage, and we've also got some fun interviews to come as well. So keep an eye out for those. If you are new to Talking Joe, make sure you are subscribed, you've hit the like box, you add a little comment if you're watching on YouTube, and you can find us on the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has links to those places. We are on Facebook, so get involved there to see all of the latest news, and get involved in the discussion. We're on Twitter, on Instagram. We are also on Patreon at patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to our backers: Richard, Sam, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, and Mike, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. Huzzah. Tim, where can people find you when you're not talking to me about the latest ARAH book on the shelves?
Video essays, youtube.com/@AtomicAbe. My brick and mortar comic book store, Hub Comics, and I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Can we expect your write-up of Codename Iowa's Assembly Required 2024 anytime soon, Tim?
Yes.
Excellent.
I would be writing it right now if I weren't talking to you.
I'm sorry to slow you down.
That's not what I meant was. What I meant was, yes.
So I think we're done, Tim. And when we're done, what do we say?
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.